There are Christian sects who are self-appointed saviors.
From devout Catholic to merciless cult master, the Antill kids built an empire on control, cruelty, and blood. Claiming visions from the divine, Roch Thériault, their leader, promised salvation but delivered suffering.
Today I'm covering the topic of Roch Thériault and his cult, the Antill Kids. Warning, this story involves many brutal descriptions of torture, so please be prepared to hear some not nice things.
In the largest mass self-harm in U.S. history, these cults promised salvation but delivered death. From apocalyptic prophecies to alien mandates, these are 15 of the most horrifying cults ever. Number 6 is so disturbing, you'll wish you could forget it. The Order of the Solar Temple, Canada, France. In October 1994, a secret brotherhood called the Order of the Solar Temple was preparing for a journey no one would return from. This led to a series of gruesome events that took place across 2 continents. These events were so insane and horrifying that in 72 hours, the lives of 52 followers were lost. By the winter solstice of 1995, 16 more would follow. Then, in March of 1997, the final 5 were gone. Some believed they were crossing into a higher world. But what actually happened at the Order of the Solar Temple? Were they escaping? Were they betrayed? Or had something far darker happened to them? Claiming to be heirs to the Knights Templar, Luc Jouret and Joseph Dimambro built a following obsessed with apocalypse and transit to Sirius, drawing in crowds from different countries with a belief that its mission was to help usher in a new age. They meditated for hours, practiced occult rituals, and spoke of ascended masters who were beings of light who, they believed, could guide humanity into a higher state of consciousness. While the group might have still looked united and strong from the outside, doubts and hidden problems were quietly growing inside. Some members noticed Dimambro's change. They began to question his authority and mystical powers. He had become authoritarian, demanding unconditional obedience. What was most shocking was that his own son, Eli, claimed that the spiritual visions witnessed by several members were staged by his father, and that the divine beings and messages received were actually produced by special effects and holograms. This led to the departure of some 15 members. Others refused to believe it. But sometime in 1994, the leaders decided the world would never understand their mission. There was only one path left. They chose to leave the world behind and cross into a higher reality. On October 3, 1994, the first blood was spilt. In Quebec, Canada, a young family and their 3-month-old son, Christopher, were killed. Their crime? Defying Dimambro's command not to have children and giving their son a name he hated. Dimambro called the boy the Antichrist. That same night, far away in Switzerland, 22 bodies were found in the village of Chery, 18 of them laid out in a perfect circle, like the spokes of a wheel. Later that day, 25 more were discovered in the quiet mountain chalets of Granges-sur-Salvan. The killings didn't end there. On the winter solstice of 1995, 16 more members who had not been invited to the original departure gathered near Grenoble, France. They took their own lives, following the same path. 2 years later, on March 22, 1997, 5 more died in Quebec. The Order of the Solar Temple left behind no survivors to tell the whole story. Only questions. But the next cult didn't just wait for prophecy. They nailed the doors shut. The movement for the restoration of the 10 Commandments. Uganda, March 2000, Uganda. More than 530 followers packed into a church for what they believed was the final sermon before the apocalypse. The cult, led by Credonia Muwerinde and Joseph Kibwetera, preached that the world's final day would arrive with the start of the new century. In the 1980s, they both claimed they had visions and received messages from Jesus and the Virgin Mary. Their goal was to obey the 10 Commandments and preach the word of Jesus Christ. At first, the cult was not cut off from society. Families joined for spiritual guidance and support. Some members were priests and nuns who had lost their roles in their previous church. They grew their own crops, ran schools, prayed, and shared their labor. But behind the prayers and farming, something darker was happening. There is evidence that the leaders committed murder and torture long before the final massacre. Around Kanungu, deep pits were found where dozens of bodies had been dumped over several years. 2 more pits, believed to be torture chambers, were found behind a ruined office. Similar pits were discovered near other branches of the church. The cult's final days began when its prophecy failed. Members had been told the world would end on December 31st, 1999, and were urged to confess their sins to be ready. This doomsday sect had claimed to know the day the world would end. When it didn't happen, they made it happen themselves. To stop a rebellion and keep control, the leaders claimed the Virgin Mary had given them a new date, March 17, 2000. This was supposed to be the last service before the apocalypse. Members gathered, the doors were nailed shut, and the building went up in flames. They were told that the Virgin Mary would usher them to the new world. But this was only the end of the beginning. No one escaped. A year later, investigators uncovered 55 more bodies in a house and mass graves across Uganda, bringing the estimated death toll to as many as 1,000. Many victims had been murdered or tortured before the final fire. If you thought that was disturbing, wait until you hear about the leader who claimed aliens demanded the death of young boys and the followers who obeyed. Superior Universal Alignment, Brazil. In 1989, the quiet Amazonian town of Altamira began to see something strange, an alarming rise in missing children. At first, police had no clues and no suspects. By 1993, the number had climbed to 19 boys, all between 8 and 13 years old. 5 of them were found dead, their bodies showing signs of torture and surgical castration. Experts concluded the operations were done by someone with medical training. Beyond that, there was no evidence. The victims were both street children and boys from stable homes. This left detectives puzzled. They struggled to believe the cases were connected, wondering who could commit such crimes against children from different backgrounds. The breakthrough came when a boy named Wanderlei Pinheiro escaped from his captors. His testimony revealed shocking abuses against children. He claimed some victims lost their lives in horrific ways, and their organs were allegedly trafficked. Rumors even suggested cannibalism, but these were never proven. What shocked the nation most was who Pinheiro accused as the perpetrators: 2 doctors, a wealthy businessman, a police officer, and a religious leader named Valentina de Andrade. Valentina thought the end of the world was near. She claimed extraterrestrial beings had spoken to her, warning of an apocalypse. According to her, salvation would only come to those who followed her teachings. And those teachings included the belief that male children born after 1981 were incarnations of evil and had to be exterminated as a form of payment to the aliens who would save them. The crimes in Altamira, later known as the Altamira child emasculations, reflected the dark beliefs of her cult. Between the late 1980s and early 1990s, at least 19 boys aged 8 to 14 were abducted. 6 were later found dead. They had been subjected to calculated and brutal harm, with evidence of severe abuse and disfigurement. Over time, 4 of the accused were caught, but Valentina fled Brazil. When she was finally arrested years later, she and the others were charged with the murders of only 5 of the victims. The Rajneesh movement, USA. In the early 1980s, the town of Antelope, Oregon, became the unlikely center of one of the strangest and most dangerous cult stories in American history. The Rajneesh movement was started by an Indian spiritual teacher named Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who later became known as Osho. His teachings were a mix of Eastern spiritual ideas Western-style capitalism, and the belief in free love. The idea that relationships and intimacy should not be bound by traditional rules like marriage. His followers were called neo-sannyasins or Rajneeshis. The movement's headquarters began in Pune, India, in 1974. But in 1981, Rajneesh moved to the U.S., buying a 60,000-acre ranch in Wasco County, Oregon, to create Rajneeshpuram, which was a perfect community that quickly attracted close attention and careful examination for being built on land zoned only for farming. Tensions exploded into open hostility when they took over the nearby town of Antill, renamed it Rajneesh, and declared their new era. For the largely Christian local population, this was an invasion. For the Rajneeshis, it was just the beginning. But how far would a religious group go to protect their dream? By 1984, Rajneesh's personal secretary, Ma Anand Sheila, and other commune leaders hatched a plan to seize control of Wasco County. Their obstacle was the Dalles, home to the largest voting bloc they couldn't sway. Their solution was as ruthless as it was calculated: make the voters too sick to cast a ballot. In the largest bioterror attack in U.S. history, Rajneeshpuram operatives poisoned salad bars in 10 restaurants with salmonella, sickening 751 people and hospitalizing 45. Fear spread through the community, and suspicion quickly turned toward the Rajneeshis. But instead of suppressing voter turnout, the attack enraged residents who showed up in force to vote against them. Federal investigators linked the attack and a later plan to kill U.S. Attorney Charles Turner to Sheila and other top members. They went to jail. Rajneesh ran away but was caught and sent out of the country. The family, Australia. Under the rule of Anne Hamilton Byrne, the family grew into a powerful and disturbing cult with over 500 followers and at least 28 children. Some born to followers, others taken from unwed mothers under false pretenses, and a few outright stolen. Anne, who presented herself as the reincarnation of Jesus and a living God, surrounded herself with loyal aunties who enforced her strict control. Children were isolated, had their hair bleached blonde, were taught at home, and endured harsh punishments. Life for them was filled with fear. If someone wets the bed, they face icy showers as discipline. Water was even used as part of intense interrogations, pressure applied until answers were given. What would that do to a child's mind? As if things could not get any worse, when Anne's pets died, she forced the children to sleep beside them in a grim ritual, leaving them with fear, unease, and nightmares that lingered. By the 1980s, Anne's control over her members had taken an even darker turn. She began instructing followers to take powerful hallucinogens in bizarre ceremonies she called clearings. Under the substance's influence, with dry ice smoke swirling, she appeared in a white gown, convincing even intelligent adults they were seeing the Almighty. She also interfered in members' personal lives, breaking up marriages without reason. The abuse extended beyond humiliation. Survivors describe waterboarding-style torture and being forced to share bedrooms with the decomposing bodies of Anne's dead pets. When police raided the group's Olinda Victoria compound in 1987, they removed all 28 children, uncovering a network of illegal adoptions and decades of psychological and physical cruelty. The Church of Euthanasia, USA. In 1992, a controversial new religion began with one strict rule: do not have children. The group called itself the Church of Euthanasia, and its founder, Chris Korda, said the idea came from a dream. In that dream, she met an alien called the Being, who spoke for other life in the universe. The Being warned her that Earth's environment was breaking down because of climate change, too many people, and using up resources. It also said that the leaders of the world were lying about these problems. Even big wars and sicknesses could not stop the number of people from growing. For Korda, the message was simple. The only way to save the earth was to have fewer people. So the church made one rule: no one could have children. If someone did, they were kicked out right away. Korda said in an interview, "Yes, we have had to remove some members. It's my hard job to do this. Since we have only one rule, we don't allow anyone to break it." The Church of Euthanasia had one main rule: don't have children. Around this, it promoted dangerous practices, including taking lives, ending pregnancies, using parts of deceased individuals for food, and non-reproductive sex. Its shocking slogan, "Save the planet, kill yourself," was meant to grab attention and spark debate about the environment. Founder Chris Korda said the church was inspired by Dadaism, an art movement that rejected reason and challenged social norms through bold and unusual actions. In 1995, the church's support for voluntary demise became more serious. They bought a billboard to advertise an end-of-life assistance hotline with the message, "Helping you every step of the way." Thousands helped. How about you? Their plan was that when people called, they would hear pre-recorded messages explaining how to transition to another life. However, the telephone company realized this was their intention and refused to turn the line on, so it never worked. That did not stop Korda. Soon, the church's website shared detailed methods for ending their earthly journey, and Korda spoke openly about them in interviews. In 1999, she said she hoped someone would follow the instructions, end it all, and as a result, the victims' mourning parents would take legal action. She said this not out of cruelty, but because it would force the media to pay attention and give the church worldwide publicity. The Church of Euthanasia's message has always been very radical. They believe humans are a parasite on Earth, and the only right choice is to reduce our numbers by choice. Some people saw this as a bold way to confront difficult truths about the environment, but many others, like religious leaders, ethicists, and human rights groups, say it is wrong and dishonors human life and dignity. In June 2003, a 52-year-old woman was found in her home in Missouri after she had passed away. Next to her were printed instructions from a website that explained how to take her own life using helium gas. She had followed them exactly. After 2015, the Church of Euthanasia basically stopped operating. They didn't post anything new, hold meetings, or organize activities anymore. The Manson family, USA. When Charles Manson was released from prison in 1967, he moved to San Francisco and gathered a group of followers, mostly young women from the city's artsy community. This group was called The Family, and they lived together in shared homes. They followed Manson's unusual religious ideas, which mixed stories from science fiction, magic, and strange psychology. He believed a big race war was coming, and he called it Helter Skelter. Manson also encouraged his followers to take lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, which some people think helped him control them. The family made money through stealing cars, selling harmful substances, and prostitution. They were also violent. In July 1969, Manson ordered the killing of Gary Hinman, leaving a cryptic message on the wall. Days later, on August 8th, he sent followers Charles Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, and Patricia Krenwinkel to a home in Los Angeles. There, actress Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, and 4 others lost their lives in a vicious attack. Another message was left at the scene, adding to the fear and confusion. 2 nights later, the group killed Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, leaving disturbing messages at the scene. Later, Mason ordered the killing of Donald "Shorty" Shea, a stuntman at Spahn Ranch. Tensions had grown as Shea was suspected of involvement in plans to remove the family from the ranch, and Manson disapproved of Shea's marriage to a black woman. In October 1969, police arrested several family members at Spahn Ranch. A breakthrough came when Susan Atkins, one of Manson's followers, told another prisoner about the murders she took part in. This caused the police to look into the case more. After that, Manson was charged with many murders and plans to commit murder. In 1971, Manson was found guilty of murder and planning murder for the deaths of 7 people. He was given the death penalty, but in 1972, the highest court in California canceled the death penalty law. Because of this, his sentence was changed to life in prison. Manson stayed in prison for the rest of his life and stayed well known to the public and the news. Aum Shinrikyo, Japan. A terrible sarin gas attack happened in Tokyo's subway, taking the lives of 13 people, injuring hundreds, and leaving many sick for a long time. The attack was done by a dangerous group called Aum Shinrikyo, a group started in 1985, which was led by Shoko Asahara. Asahara said it was his job to take on the world's sins. Because of this, he could free anyone who followed him from their sins. He also wrote a detailed plan about the end of the world, which said a third big war would start because of the United States. Asahara said that only people who joined his group, Aum Shinrikyo, would live when the world ended, even though Aum Shinrikyo was not liked by many smart and rich people joined. By 1993, Aum Shinrikyo was making dangerous nerve gases in secret and had already used them in attacks, including one in Matsumoto where 8 people died. The group were motivated by their belief that the world was ending soon and a wish to cause a big fight to change everything. On March 20, 1995, cult members put bags of sarin gas on 5 subway trains during rush hour. They poked holes in the bags to release the gas, causing fear and panic all over Tokyo. Authorities got worried after a lawyer investigating the cult was killed in 1994 and after attacks using chemical weapons. This made the police raid the group in 1995. They searched the cult's labs and found enough poison to kill millions of people. They arrested hundreds of cult members. Asahara was caught and given the death penalty, along with other leaders. The Branch Davidians, USA. The Branch Davidians were a group who lived in Waco in 1935, preparing for the end of days and the imminent return of Jesus. They also complained that the Adventists had abandoned this task in favor of worldly pursuits. Under leader David Koresh, the Branch Davidians became more focused and intense in their beliefs. His followers saw him as a divine messenger who claimed to unlock God's apocalyptic plan. Koresh took several spiritual wives, some of whom were teenagers. This led to minor harassment accusations from a former member and an anti-cult activist. In 1992, a court case brought these claims into the spotlight. Koresh also started a gun business, which caught the police's attention. Investigators were worried that the Branch Davidians might attack their neighbors or the town of Waco because of their end-of-the-world beliefs. On February 28, 1993, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, attempted to raid their Mount Nebo compound. A fierce gunfight erupted, leaving 5 agents and 5 Davidians dead. This sparked a 51-day FBI siege. Armed tanks surrounded the compound as negotiators tried to free the followers. The Davidians believed the siege fulfilled a biblical prophecy of suffering. On April 19th, the FBI launched a final assault, and a fire engulfed the compound, killing 76 people, including Koresh and 25 children. The Children of God, the Family International. California was the starting point in 1968 for preacher David Brandt Berg, who formed Teens for Christ, later renamed Children of God. He sent letters that blended Bible verses with his own visions, which became the group's guiding rules. Members often depended entirely on the group for shelter, food, and community, which made leaving very difficult. They gave all their money and time to the cause and came to see the group as their only true family. By the 1970s, Berg introduced a practice called flirty fishing, instructing women to use intimacy to recruit followers or bring in money. Former members described it as manipulative and damaging. Reports also surfaced of inappropriate contact between adults and underage members. Police raids and court cases in several countries exposed abuse, and survivors spoke of long-term exploitation. The group expanded worldwide, changing its name to the Family of Love, and later, the Family International. Members were trained to recruit, fundraise, and live under strict rules, with leadership centered on Berg and later a small inner circle. While the group engaged in public missionary work, it also used secretive tactics, like flirty fishing. Berg's writings often included troubling directives that critics say enabled exploitation. Facing the AIDS crisis and public outrage in the 1980s, the group abandoned flirty fishing, but lasting harm to members had already been done. NXIVM, USA. NXIVM was a group in Albany, New York, founded in 1998. It claimed to be guided by humanitarian principles to help people and make the world better. Many joined hoping for self-improvement and community. But could something that looks so safe really hide danger? At the center was Keith Raniere, known as Vanguard. He created a secret subgroup called DOS, which is short for the Latin phrase Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which means Master of the Obedient Sisterhood. In this group, women were called slaves and were required to give personal and private information called collateral to the leaders. This could be highly personal information or damaging statements. Once given, it could be used to control or intimidate them. One member, Canadian actress Sarah Edmondson, joined NXIVM in 2005, but left after being inducted into DOS by actress Allison Mack. She later revealed she was blindfolded and forcibly branded as part of the group's secret initiation ritual. In 2017, former members went public, sparking an investigation. Raniere was arrested in 2018 and is now serving 120 years in prison. Heaven's Gate, USA. Founded by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, Heaven's Gate believed salvation lay in leaving Earth for a higher plane aboard an alien spacecraft trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. In March 1997, 39 members donned identical black shirts, sweatpants, and brand-new Nike Decade sneakers, drank a lethal mix of phenobarbital and vodka, and lay down with purple shrouds over their faces. The Antill Kids, Canada. Roch Thériault was devoutly Catholic at a tender age. He grew up hating the religion, dropped out of school, and began obsessively studying the Old Testament, convinced that a cosmic war between good and evil would culminate in an apocalypse in 1979. At a young age, Thériault was already showing signs of instability, violent outbursts, heavy drinking, and a messianic complex. He renamed himself Moses, and declared himself a prophet. In 1977, he founded the Antill Kids, a group loosely inspired by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but his beliefs were driven by his own frightening visions of the end of the world. Thériault convinced his followers to sell everything, sever ties with their families, and follow him into the wilderness of Somerville Township, Quebec. There, they built a community that was isolated, self-sustaining, and completely under his control. They wore uniform tunics to symbolize equality, sold handmade goods to survive, and waited for the end of the world. But when February 1979 came and went, the very time Thériault had predicted the world would end, and nothing happened. Instead of giving up or losing control, he held on even tighter to his power and became even more controlling over his followers. Thériault declared all the women his wives and fathered 23 children. But polygamy was just the beginning. Over time, he handed out extreme punishments to those he believed had disobeyed, inflicting physical harm, degrading treatment, and psychological torment to maintain control. His punishment grew unimaginably cruel, leaving followers with life-altering injuries. Even children were subjected to shocking mistreatment. No one was safe, not even from each other, as he forced members to harm one another to prove their loyalty. Thériault's behavior fits the profile of a malignant narcissist with sadistic tendencies. He believed he was divinely chosen, immune to moral consequence, and entitled to absolute obedience. His drinking worsened his paranoia, and he imposed total control, forbidding interaction without his presence, regulating intimacy, and punishing anyone who tried to leave. Cult member Gabrielle Lavallée endured some of the worst abuse, suffering severe injuries that nearly cost her life. Against all odds, she survived and would become the key to ending it all. In 1989, Solange Boilard complained of stomach pain. Thériault responded by punching her, performing a mock enema with olive oil, and slicing her open. He forced another cult member to remove her intestines, stitched her up, and declared he could resurrect her. When she didn't revive, he removed one of her ribs and wore it around his neck. That was the breaking point. Gabrielle Lavallée escaped and alerted authorities. A manhunt began. Thériault was arrested, tried, and sentenced to life in prison. He died in 2011 after being murdered by a fellow inmate. Jonestown, Guyana. On November 18, 1978, a gruesome tragedy occurred. Over 900 people died in Jonestown, Guyana, a settlement that was part of the People's Temple, led by Jim Jones. He began the group in Indiana in the 1950s and later moved it to California. In the 1970s, Jones had built a strong following in Los Angeles, gaining respect and many followers through his shows and community work. However, he treated members harshly, forcing them to give up their belongings and live in fear. Families were split, and members were made to watch each other closely. After people began questioning his actions, Jones took about 1,000 followers to Guyana, saying they would build a perfect place to live. But things went very wrong. In 1978, reports began to surface about troubling conditions inside Jonestown, the settlement led by Jim Jones in Guyana. Concerned relatives of People's Temple members contacted U.S. officials, claiming that their loved ones were being held against their will and subjected to abuse. In response, Congressman Leo Ryan decided to visit Jonestown to investigate these claims personally and ensure the well-being of the Americans living there. When Leo Ryan visited to check on the group, he was killed. That same day, Jim Jones told everyone to drink poison while guards watched. Most of them did, including many children. It was one of the saddest events in American history. Among the cults we've discussed, the Antill kids remain the most haunting. But the question is, how far would you be willing to follow someone before realizing that you had gone too far and there was no way back? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.